Let me ask you something. If you had to choose between the easy road, that feels safe, and a road that asks everything from you, but promises nothing in return, which one would you take? Most people would pick safety. That's just how we're wired. We chase comfort. We avoid risk. We protect ourselves. But Ruth, she chose something different. She had every reason to walk away. No future, no husband, no clear plan, just a grieving mother-in-law and a foreign land ahead. And still, she stayed. She didn't stay because it made sense. She didn't stay because it was easy. She stayed because of something deeper. Loyalty, devotion, faith. And that choice, that quiet, unseen decision, changed everything. She went from a nameless widow to a woman whose name is written in the story of Jesus. Not because she fought for power, but because she stayed when everyone else walked away. The cost of true devotion. Ruth's story doesn't begin with a miracle. It begins with loss. She was a Moabite woman, married into an Israelite family. Then everything fell apart. Her father-in-law died, then her husband, then her brother-in-law, 3 women, left behind. No men, no provision, no status, and in those days, a woman without a husband was invisible, forgotten, voiceless. Naomi, her mother-in-law, was broken. She turned to Ruth and Orpah, her daughters-in-law, and said, "Go back to your people. Start over. Don't stay with me." Orpah wept and left, and no one blames her for that. But Ruth, she stayed. She didn't know what was waiting in Bethlehem. She didn't know if she'd be accepted. She had no guarantees. She just knew one thing. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. That wasn't just emotion. It wasn't obligation. It was a choice. A quiet, unseen, deliberate choice. A decision to commit. Even when there was no promise of a reward. Even when everything said, "Turn back." That kind of devotion isn't weak. It's rare. And in the hands of God, it's powerful. 1. Loyal in loss, when everything falls apart and you still stay. Let's be honest, loyalty sounds beautiful until life starts breaking apart. It's easy to stay when things are working, when love feels good, when you're seen, when you're appreciated. But what happens when the people you gave your heart to are gone? When the future you built collapses? When you wake up and everything that made sense yesterday is now a question you can't answer? That's where Ruth's story really begins. She didn't just lose a husband. She lost a culture, a family, a future. She could have gone back to Moab, back to what she knew, back to the familiar language, the food, the customs, her mother, her childhood home. But she didn't. And that choice, to stay in the middle of grief, to hold on to someone else's pain, to walk into a future that didn't belong to her yet, that's the kind of loyalty that heaven pays attention to. Because loyalty isn't really tested when things are good. It's proven when the people around you have nothing left to offer, and you love them anyway. Ruth didn't stay to gain. She stayed because she understood something we forget. Loyalty isn't about reward. It's about identity. She wasn't just loyal to Naomi. She was loyal to something bigger. To the covenant Naomi carried. To the God Naomi followed. Even if she didn't fully understand it yet. And here's where it gets real for us. You might be in a season where it feels like everything's been taken from you. Maybe loyalty feels like a waste. Like staying faithful is getting you nowhere. But maybe that's exactly where God wants to meet you, because the kind of loyalty that doesn't demand answers, that shows up in the silence, that stays through the fire, that's the kind of loyalty God blesses in ways you can't see yet. 2. Align with God's people, choosing the right spiritual circle. If you pay close attention to Ruth's words, you'll realize she didn't just say, "I'll go where you go." She said something far more powerful, something that shifted the entire course of her life. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. That wasn't just poetry. That was a declaration, an identity shift, a spiritual commitment. Because Ruth wasn't just choosing Naomi, she was choosing a new covenant, a new circle, a new God, a new way of living. And here's what makes that decision so radical. She made that choice when Naomi had nothing. No land, no protection, no promises. Ruth wasn't signing up for privilege. She was surrendering to purpose. She saw something in Naomi's brokenness that still carried the fingerprints of God. And instead of running back to what was familiar, she chose to walk into what was holy. Now, pause with me for a moment. Most of us say we want to grow. We want to get closer to God. We want peace, purpose, healing. But few of us are willing to do what Ruth did, to walk away from the comfortable crowd and align ourselves with people who live by faith. Because here's the truth. You can't build a spiritual life in a circle that mocks the spiritual. You can't grow in faith if you're constantly surrounded by doubt, drama, and noise. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is change who you sit with, who you listen to, who you follow, who you serve alongside. Ruth aligned herself with God's people, even before she fully understood what that meant. And that choice, that alignment, placed her in position for God's favor, even when she couldn't see it yet. Let's get real for a second. What if the frustration in your spiritual life isn't about you not being enough, but about you being in the wrong room? What if the blessings you're praying for are waiting on the other side of obedience in your relationships? Because alignment always comes before assignment. Ruth's blessing didn't start when Boaz noticed her. It started the moment she walked away from Moab and said, "Your people will be my people, and your God my God." It started the moment she decided, "I may not belong yet, but I'm planting myself where God is." And maybe today, that's your invitation too. Not to have it all figured out, not to feel perfect, but to choose. To choose alignment with faith, with truth, with people who walk in the same direction you're called to go, because the people you walk with shape the future you step into. 3. Silent obedience, when no one's watching, but you still move. After Ruth made her bold declaration, after she walked away from everything familiar, she didn't get a reward. She didn't get celebrated. She didn't suddenly step into comfort or certainty. Instead, she stepped into routine. The next time we see her, she's not in a palace. She's not being praised. She's in the fields, bending down, gathering leftover grain, one stalk at a time. No music, no miracle, just manual labor. And that is one of the most overlooked forms of faith. Obedience in the mundane, faithfulness in silence, devotion when no one's clapping. Let's be honest. It's easy to show up when people notice, when your work is affirmed, when your service is seen. But what about when it isn't? What about when you pray and feel nothing? When you give and no one says thank you? When you serve and it seems like no one even cares? That's the kind of obedience that separates the surface level from the deep-rooted. Because Ruth wasn't working for recognition. She wasn't angling for position. She was simply faithful. And here's what's wild. It was in that very place, that quiet, ordinary place, where destiny started to move. Boaz saw her, not because she shouted, not because she demanded attention, but because her quiet obedience caught the attention of heaven, and eventually, of the man who would redeem her story. This is where so many of us get weary. We do what's right and wonder if it matters. We keep showing up and question if anyone sees. But Ruth reminds us, God does His best work in the places that feel forgotten. So if you're gathering grain in silence right now, showing up for your kids, staying faithful in your job, loving someone through their mess, choosing God when it's not exciting, don't stop. The field may feel empty today, but favor is watching from a distance, and in God's timing, it always moves closer. You don't need to be loud to be faithful. You just need to keep moving when no one's watching, because one day, that simple yes will become the doorway to something you never expected. 4. Tactical submission, surrender that moves strategy. Let's talk about something we don't often associate with strength: submission. In a world that glorifies control, where being in charge is the goal, submission often sounds weak, passive, even foolish. But Ruth shows us something different, something deeper. After working faithfully in the fields, she returns home with grain. Naomi sees the favor beginning to move. She senses that God is orchestrating something. And so she tells Ruth, "Tonight, go to the threshing floor. Wait until Boaz lies down. Then uncover his feet and lie down. Now pause." This sounds odd to us, even scandalous maybe. But this wasn't a flirtation. This was a cultural sign of humility and request for covering, for redemption. Ruth wasn't throwing herself at Boaz. She was positioning herself, boldly, humbly, strategically, to be part of something greater than herself. And here's what's so powerful. She didn't argue. She didn't question the plan. She didn't say, "That's not how I do things." She listened. And she moved in obedience, but not blind obedience. Strategic submission. She trusted Naomi's wisdom. She trusted God's timing. She knew that positioning herself with humility was not weakness, it was alignment. Alignment with a redemptive plan she couldn't see fully yet. And maybe that's where some of us get stuck. We think if we're not controlling it, then we're not strong. But what if real strength is knowing when to surrender with intention? What if spiritual strategy looks like stepping back so God can step forward? Ruth's act wasn't loud, but it was clear. It said, "I'm not here to manipulate the outcome, but I am here, available, positioned, ready to receive if God wills it." That's not passive, that's powerful. And it makes us ask, where might God be asking us to submit? Not in fear, but in faith, to a process, to timing, to silence, to His voice through someone wiser. Because sometimes the door doesn't open until we kneel in front of it. And Ruth knelt, not before a man, but before a destiny, and heaven responded. 5. From fields to favor, when humility leads you to the spotlight. It started in a field, with dirt on her hands, sweat on her back, no promises, no title, no one cheering. Ruth was just a woman surviving, picking up what others left behind, staying faithful in silence. But God was writing something bigger. Because one day, that same field she quietly worked in became the place where favor found her. Boaz saw her, not because she demanded attention, not because she tried to stand out, but because she carried something rare, a presence marked by quiet strength. And Boaz didn't just give her more grain. He gave her access. He told his men, "Let her gather freely. Leave extra for her to find." That's favor, and not the kind you earn by performance, but the kind that finds you when you've been faithful with little. It's what happens when you keep doing what's right, long after it stops feeling rewarding. Now pause with me. So many of us want Boaz-level blessings, without Ruth-level obedience. We want the spotlight, without walking through the silence. We want the promotion, without the process. But the kingdom doesn't work that way. Ruth wasn't trying to be seen. She was just being who she was. Humble, consistent, loyal, present. And God, in His perfect timing, let favor find her, right where she was. No striving, no chasing, just walking and being seen. Let that sink in. You don't have to manipulate your way into someone's heart. You don't have to scheme your way into a breakthrough. You just have to be faithful in the field you've been given. Because when God decides to move, no one can block what's coming your way. And maybe that's where you are right now, still gathering, still waiting, still wondering if your name is even known. But here's the truth. Heaven never forgets obedience. Favor never misses the faithful. And what looks like just another ordinary day in the field might be the day your name gets called. 6. Legacy of loyalty. When devotion outlives you. Ruth's story could have ended at redemption. She could have married Boaz, lived a quiet, blessed life, and faded into history as just another name. But God had more in mind. Because what started as loss became legacy. Ruth gave birth to a son named Obed. Obed became the father of Jesse. Jesse became the father of David, the greatest king Israel had ever known. And from David's line came Jesus. Let that sink in. This foreign widow, a Moabite outsider, became the great-grandmother of the Messiah, all because she stayed. Because she didn't run when life got hard. Because she didn't cling to safety. Because she said, "Where you go, I will go." She had no idea that her loyalty would echo for generations. But God knew. And this is the part that humbles me most. Ruth didn't live to see the fullness of her legacy. She never met David. She never saw a throne. She never heard the name Jesus. She just lived with faith and trusted that her yes, her loyalty, her obedience, her surrender would matter. And it did, more than she could have imagined. Here's the truth. You may never see the full impact of your faithfulness. You might serve and love and forgive and think it's all small, insignificant. But in God's hands, every act of loyalty is a seed. And some seeds don't bloom in your lifetime, but they outlive you. Maybe your children will eat from the fruit of what you planted in pain. Maybe someone you mentored will change the course of a generation. Maybe your simple, quiet devotion will ripple into eternity. Because God doesn't just bless the loyal, He builds legacy through them. So if you're choosing faith in the middle of uncertainty, if you're staying when it would be easier to walk away, you're in good company. You're walking in the footsteps of Ruth, and you're building something that heaven will never forget. Ruth didn't just stay, she shifted the future. Ruth didn't stay because it made sense. She didn't stay because it was safe. She stayed because something in her spirit knew there was more. More than what she lost. More than what she came from. More than what others expected from her. And that's what changed everything. She didn't fight with weapons. She didn't climb for power. She simply aligned herself with God's plan. One silent, steady step at a time. But that kind of obedience, that kind of loyalty, that kind of surrender, it moves heaven. And if you've been wondering, Whether your quiet faithfulness matters, whether your unseen sacrifices count, whether your obedience is leading anywhere. Let Ruth's life answer that for you. Yes, it does. It always does. Because God never wastes a loyal heart. He doesn't forget the field you stayed in. He doesn't ignore the vows you made in the dark. And He never overlooks the ones who stayed behind when others walked away. Ruth's story is not just an encouragement. It's a call to action, a call to rise up. Not in loudness, but in loyalty. A call to stop chasing recognition and start standing where God placed you. A call to plant yourself in faith and let favor find you when the time is right. If you've been quietly showing up, staying loyal, walking in faith when no one sees, this message is your confirmation. Don't stop now. You're not forgotten. You're being positioned. Subscribe if you're ready to walk in the kind of strength Ruth carried. Comment below, "I choose to stay faithful even when it's hard." And share this with someone who's in their silent season. Someone who needs to know that their loyalty still matters in the kingdom of God.